Avinu Malkeinu on Rosh Hashana starts off Avinu Malkeinu Ein Lanu Melech Ela Ata. That's the song that the Rabbi taught us. Not on Rosh Hashana. So we recite, the first one is Vatanu Lefanecha, sin before you. That means it's not printed in the Matzah or in the Siddur, it's going to say it over here. It says in the Siddur, don't say it on Rosh Hashanah. So, doing the rest of it says to make sure that you say it. So we spoke about Kriya Satayra on the first day, Hashana. So the first day about Sarah and Haftarah about Hannah, two women that were remembered. There's also Rachel mentioned. I'm trying to remember now. My father told me recently something. Not to put it in the Halachah. Two letters. In other words, there's only one letter in each name that's unique for all three women. Meaning, sin is unique by Sarah, doesn't have it in the other two. Lamed is unique in Rachel, because the Rosh is here and the Tes is here. The Nun is unique in Hannah. I just don't remember the significance of the two letters and that unique. That's my father again.
Okay, so it's like the Rosh is only two people have Rosh.
Maybe Lashan, maybe like
Lashon.
Two people have Hay.
So what does that mean?
Lashan.
Lashon is the tongue, but to speak.
I don't know, is that both of them like spoke to third, like
yeah, they spoke to Hashem.
Spoke to Hashem.
Lashon, they spoke to Hashem.
The way
Sounded more exciting.
Oh, what your father told you was more exciting.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You wanted to know, by the way, let's start off with a little lighter thing. You asked, remember when I wrote on the board all the different names of Hashem? So she asked a very interesting question. So all the names of Hashem, the way they're written the regular way. Meaning, whenever you say numbers in Hebrew, in Lashon Kodesh, you say the bigger number first. You say like, so you write it at least. Right? Let's see, say for example, Ma is 45, right? That was one of the combinations. Sag is 63, that was one of the combinations, right? Av 72, but it always has a higher one, 40, 60, 70, and then the single digits. So it has the tens first and the singles afterwards. And the other one, by Ban, it's written like this. The tens are afterwards.
Why?
So she asked why. I said I don't have time to explain it. But the explanation that I heard.
That's 52, right?
Yes. The explanation that I heard was from the Rebbe's, in the name of the Rebbe's father. He was a big Kabbalist. He's explained like this: that the number 9 is a very special number in general because it always
9. There's something about people's names. You can take all the letters of a person's name and...
One second. The significance of 9 is that it represents truth because it always...
Come back to 9,
it
something
always
like
comes
this.
back to 9 somehow. How does that work?
When you, let's say you do 9 times 2, the number 8.
Oh, good. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so 9 times 3. So actually, that's why they teach the kids. In my days, they didn't teach that to me.
That's how
So
they
you
taught
don't
us
have
in
to.
Israel.
Yeah, you don't
Yes,
have
in
to.
Israel.
You don't have to memorize the 9 times table because you just let's see, it's 9 times 3. So,
You take one
67,
off.
right? So they just tell you how to do that. Okay, so so every combination. So what he explained was, so therefore it represents MS, truth. It always comes back to that. Okay? doesn't change. Emes, the concept of emes is that it doesn't change. It's constant. So what he said was that the names of Hashem is emes. Hashem is truth. Okay, so all the names of Hashem end up being 9. Okay, because in gematria, in numerical values, the way it works is everything has a value. So let's say ayin is 70, base is 2, it's 72. But then there's what's called misperkata. It's basically you ignore the zeros, right? So 70 is also 7. 700 is 7, right? So it comes out, if you use that one, everyone is 9, right? 7 and 2 is 9, 6 and 3 is 9, 5 and 4 is 9. It's really 40, but if you use the misperkata, right? If you divide by 10, right?
Yeah.
So therefore each one equals 9. Nun days doesn't equal, nun days is 52.
So that comes to
7
7.
doesn't equal 9. Okay? So that's why it's written this way. Why is it written this way? Because after you finish the Aleph days, Saf is 400, right? Aleph through Yud is 1 through 10. Right? Chaf through Kuf is 20 through 100, and then you have Resh is 200, Shin is 300, Saf is 400. Okay? Then all the end letters, it's not always used this way, but if you want to get technical, all the end letters, so Lange Kaf, Shlaf Mem, Lange Nun, Lange Pei, and Lange Tzadik. So they go from 500, 600, 700, 800, 900. Get it?
Say that again? Okay, wait a second.
In other words,
Okay.
Aleph and Tes is 1 through 9, right? Then Yud through Kuf is 10 through 100. Resh is 200. Shin is 300. Kaf is 400, right?
Right.
That's regular gematria.
Right.
Okay? This percussion would just be take away the zeros. If you continue it, then all the end letters,
So
Right.
feet numbers.
so so they continue the same thing, right? So Chaf would be 500, end Chaf would be 5, end Mem would be 6,
600.
end Nun would be 700.
Oh, really?
So that's
And did we
why-
actually do that?
That's why they flip it around. So we're writing it as an end Nun. End Nun is 700.
Oh, so now
700 misperkatan is 7, so it's again
7
2.
2. Okay. Okay. So wait a minute, and then Fei
Got
is 800.
Yeah, so
800, and Tzadi is 900. Okay.
let's go back to.
Okay.
So that's what you asked about that question. I told you I wanted to explain it to you, but I had to run that thing.
Thank you.
Pious we spoke about, so I'm gonna basically skip over that.
Cool. Very cool. Hashem is you made a good alphabet. All of this.
Yosef, again, also we spoke about Malchus, Furnace, and Shofars. Each one, way it's structured, 10, 10, and 10. How we do the Shofar afterwards. The series that we do, the 10 sounds after Malchus, 10 after the Furnace, 10 after Shofars. The things that we add for Aseret Yemei Tshuva exist in Musaf as well, right? The Malach HaKadosh at the end of that bracha, Zachreinu and Avarachamam. So I'm telling you the Sefer is showing. Okay. Musa and in the Chazar Sashatz again you have the four kedusha, the 4 katser. You have a lot of piyutim. Those are all those nice tefillahs that are added. Okay, and again, you see in the first day and the second day, it's just certain changes. Certain ones are said in Shachas, and the other one in Musaf, and the second day it's flipped around. There's one very famous piyut. It's called in Hashana Tekef, so I'll just quickly say the story behind it. You might be familiar with it. Basically, it was composed by a sage or a great tzaddik, a righteous person. His name was Rabbi. He was a community leader, a Talmud Chacham in Mainz, and he was very influential, very wealthy, and the people in the church, I guess, were trying to, in the government and the church, they were trying to, usually closely connected over there, they were trying to influence him, convince him, they were nudging him constantly that he should consider converting, and they were pressuring him a lot, and of course he had no intention of doing so. But at some point, the pressure was very strong, and he told them they should give him a few days to think about it. He was just trying to push them off, but afterwards he regretted it very strongly that he kind of implied that he's going to consider such a thing, which he would never really do. He felt extremely bad about it. So after the 3 days were up, they sent a message that he should come. Of course, he didn't want to go. So they after a while, they brought him forcefully, and he said, basically lied. He said you were going to come back, and then now you're like, and then you didn't come. So he said, let me say my punishment. And he said that the tongue that said, sorry, just my eyes. The tongue that said that that he's going to consider converting, that tongue be cut out. So they said, no, I don't want to do that. The whoever was in charge over there said that's not going to be a punishment. I want the feet that didn't come when you said you were going to come. I want the feet to be cut off. So they cut off his feet, and then later his hands, I think, one at a time, tortured him more and more. And then he was still alive afterwards, and they sent him home. This happened shortly before Rosh Hashana. So on Rosh Hashana, he asked someone to bring him to shul, and before Keser, before Kedusha of Musaf, he said that they should bring him to the Kodesh or whatever it is, and he said a tefillah. He said he didn't cut out his tongue, so he wanted, and that was the only thing he had, was he cut off all his limbs. So he said this tefillah. He composed this tefillah called the Hashana Tekef, proclaiming Hashem's holiness, and then towards the end it speaks about that in Rosh Hashana, the person's fate is inscribed, how exactly what's going to be, and then it says that Tshuva Tzedakah can reverse the Zera. If there was a decree that a person should die through fire or through whatever type of possible death that could be, punishment, etc. So it's a very, very serious and it gets to the core, and people stand for this. The Darn Kodesh is open. It's a very serious piyut. From all the piyutim that are there, this is like really like the highlight, the most famous and most. After he finished, he passed away on in front of Darn Kodesh, and later, some point, I don't know, some point later, a short time afterwards, he came to one of the sages of his generation. I don't recall now who it was, and he came to him in a dream, and he taught him the words of the piyut that he authored, and he asked him to spread it amongst all the communities, That's what we have. That's this view.
About what year was that?
I don't know. I'm guessing it was in the times that it was shining, like in the times of, I'm guessing, maybe it was a little earlier.
Which page?
And the sign of Toikif, and this one is on page 200. We recited on both days Rosh Hashana before Musaf and on Yom Kippur. And if you read it, I don't have to read it. You can just read the translation. You'll see it's a very it hits the it hits the core of Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur. Hashem remembering. He describes it as all the creations go past Hashem to be judged, and Hashem judges them. On Rosh Hashanah it's written what should be their fate, and in Kippur it's sealed, and then it finishes off that through tshuva and tefillah and tzedakah we have the strength to overturn. There's a bad gzera.
So you said all creations, so like animals and plants?
Yeah, everything is judged on Rosh Hashanah.
So with humans, we can do tzedakah,
Correct.
tefillah, etc. But how would animals? I mean, like we hear stories about animals being destroyed.
I don't know if they could.
Or plants.
Yeah, I mean, probably they're not going to be punished. I mean, it's hard to know. I mean, they could be punished if they go against what they're naturally supposed to be doing. Like in the Mabel, the animals were punished also, besides for fish. I didn't give that much thought how that works. I suppose if they could sin, then they could correct their ways also. They don't have free choice. It's hard to understand how that. I didn't really think about that. I don't know how that works.
So fish, you said fish not destroyed in the Mabel?
No, in the Bible, that's what it says. That because even the animals didn't stay to their own kind. The fish did apparently. So
But I thought fish did die because when it says that the fountains of the deep were brought up, that a lot
they didn't die. That was always a miracle. Like on the one hand, it wasn't really a miracle that the fish didn't die because they could
the
live
water
in
was
water.
boiling.
But the water was boiling, so it was a miracle that they didn't die. Because they didn't
And also,
deserve to
wasn't
be
there a lot of
punished.
schmutz in the water because the water was
They
stirred?
they weren't killed. They weren't killed in the Bible. That's what it says.
That's amazing.
Because they didn't change their way like the other animals did. Now, on Rosh Hashana, the congregation bows one time when Aleinu is recited. Now, Aleinu is part of Malchias. The psukim in Aleinu is part of Malchias. I think, yeah. Maybe it's not, maybe it isn't. We'll have to check what are the 10. You know it is, I think it's the first. Because of a second, like when Aleinu finishes, when it finishes off, like it's written in your Torah, Hashem Yimlech Leilam Vad. Hashem will be king forever. So that's the first of Malchias, right? That's the first pasuk of describing Hashem's kingship. The first part of Aleinu, okay? So then the congregation, so it says in the Matzah, we're to bow and what to recite quietly. The custom is that only the men bow. And in Kippur, there's a bunch of times that everybody bow, that the men at least bow down. That's when they're doing the avodah, the Kippur Musaf, in addition to regular malchus, occurrence, and shofars. Okay, so first of all, it's different in the sense that the shofar is not blown. Okay, because it's not a mitzvah to blow the shofar. Another difference is that an important section of Musaf is the avodah of Yom Kippur. Basically, it's a bunch of pages that describe the avodah of Yom Kippur, the service in the Beis HaMikdash, and part of the things were whenever Hashem's name was recited, when we were doing the service, the people outside bow down. So we do that every time. That when we're speaking about when we're reading about the avodah, when we get up to that part that the kohen the kohen gadol was saying vidui, that he was saying the confession. So when he mentioned Hashem's name in the confession, everybody would bow. Okay, the kohenim that were standing and the nation that were standing, the Yidden that were standing in the Azara, would bow down. So we bow down when we say that part.
And the Kohen Gadol would be saying Havaya, but the way they knew
He
to
would
say
say
it.
Hashem's name, the full way.
Mhm.
And that's not a Rosh Hashana, because that's not the avodah. That's
was
only
Yom
in the
Kippur.
section that describes the avodah, the service of Yom Kippur.
Uh-huh.
Service of Rosh Hashanah was pretty much a regular Yom Tov service in terms of the Musaf, the korbanos that were brought, and that, so it doesn't have that part. But during the Aleinu, so when it says Anak Nekoirin, they bow. So there's one time when the people bow. And in our circles, I don't know in other circles if it's different. In our circles, the custom is that only the men bow. And I'm saying in the men's section, women don't bow in the women's section. And in Kippur as well.
Now, this is in Elena, women bow normally.
We bow a little slightly, yeah.
Right, but
I don't know why. I don't think I saw. I looked into it a little bit. I don't think there was like a very interesting or compelling explanation about that. And I think in other communities they even do. Like I don't think there was it's just a zeta. It's not a. In other words, it's not hard. It's not a requirement. It's not really like part of davening or anything like that. It's just a zeta. Just a reminder that the people bow then. So it doesn't have to be done by everybody. I forgot to mention before after done, there's no Yizkar on Rosh Hashana. Okay, both days. On neither day, that is to say, there's no Yizkar.
It's only on Yom Kippur.
There's Birchas Kohanim on both days during the end of Lusa. Okay, and the second day is considerably shorter, I guess, in terms of piyutim that are said. Also. We spoke also about the last set of 10 gears that are blown in Kaddish, that follows Musaf. And we say Kavi Aleinu is like a typical day or a typical Shabbos. And Tehillim, and then after Tehillim, with the three added chapters of Tehillim that are said every day from Elul till Shmini, till how do you call it? Till Yom Kippur. And after that, after Tehillim, so we said there's another 30. Okay? So that is, then we go home and eat. Then is Mincha. Mincha's like a Yom Tov Mincha. You say Asher V'Altzion, and then Shemay Esrei. And then the Chazan repeats it. There's no Kriyas HaTorah unless it falls in Shabbos. And it's pretty short. In other words, there's no piyutim or anything like that that's added in Shemona Esrei. Just the nusach of the Amida is the longer version of the third bracha, the Kaddish, that has all the chains, right? And it has a Melech HaKadosh, and it has Zacheinu L'Chaim, and Michamoich and Chsoid and the Sefer, like just those differences that are between Esrei. Then we see Avinu Malkeinu afterwards. David Shamayri and Aleinu, and after Mincha is Tashla. On the first day is Tashla. Okay? If you, for whatever reason, can't make it on the first day, so
Not
you,
sleep.
so it's brought down not to sleep during the day of Rosh Hashana.
Both days.
Both days is better, yeah. And I guess it's more serious about it the first day. Better not to, unless you're not feeling well. You have a headache or something like that, then you can lie down. But just the rest, not like a regular Shabbos or Yom Tov where it's encouraged like to rest. The Rosh Hashana, that's not. It's a day of judgment. We don't. It says it's brought down if somebody, Rizal maybe, if somebody sleeps during the day of Rosh Hashanah, then his mazel is like his mazel for the year is like sleepy and not. So it's discouraged unless you're not feeling well. Okay. There is something about in Halachah, the way it's brought down is that you could sleep after Chatzos, which means after midday, after 1 o'clock. But the common practice is not to do that. And the way it's explained over there is that the big tzaddikim, like the Arizal, what they accomplished during their sleep, that was okay if they slept, or it was appropriate after midday they slept. But people like us, we should just stay awake and say Tehillim. And the main the Rabbi taught us is that the main avoid like the main focus of Rosh Hashana is Tehillim. In other words, not learning. Learning is more something which there's a lot of focus on yourself, your understanding, and your Rosh Hashanah. It's all about Kabbalah. It's all about giving ourselves over to do Hashem's will, and we say Tehillim. We're soldiers. We're ready to do whatever Hashem asks from us. We're going to listen to Him, accepting the yoke of heaven. That's the Avodah.
You still say Kitas.
Yeah, you could. That doesn't say, but the focus. In other words, what the focus is placed on is saying a lot of Tehillim. That's the focus. Okay, so the Tashlech is in this Mach, that's page 291. First it has, it's explained actually in the Machzer. It explains the basic idea behind it. It says on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, after the Mincha, before sunset, it's proper to go to a well or a spring that contains fish, preferably, where water symbolizes, this is it's out there, it's printed out there on the Siddur, so it's explaining a little bit of the symbolism of it. Water symbolizes kindness, and fish have ever open eyes. And recite the 13 divine attributes of mercy mentioned in the verses. Who is God like you? In other words, these psukim, Mik El Chamaycha, that's written over here, they correspond to the 13 attributes of mercy. In the Machzor, the way it's printed, is to tell you which verses or which section, which words of the pasuk correspond to each midah, each attribute of mercy. So we recite that, followed by this also, it's from Tehillim, and then there's like a short prayer that basically it's a short tefillah saying about the 13 Yugim and Midas Arachamim, that we should basically be forgiven. And it's called Tashlach. The service is called Tashlach because it comes from the pasuk. The Sashlach when Sulas Yom Kol Chates, like you throw all your sins in the sea. It's part of.
So it means throw away.
Tashlach means like to throw away. It says that part of why we go to fish is because, like I mentioned, there's the other time that there's no ayin hara on fish because they're concealed. There's more than
That's
a lot
why
of
culture like love to put fishes everywhere.
Where? In which culture?
Like in us, like Tunisian, like they like the red fishes. They put them like in events, or they had like
I didn't know that.
bracelet like
The
with
bracelet I know of.
fishes. Yeah,
I never knew that.
yeah.
See, this is mentioned in the sources why not? If you like it, if you like fish. Hmm? Is it? I never heard of that. What she's mentioning, saying that in certain cultures and certain they like to have it because it shows like on this idea that there's no ayin hara. But I never heard of it till now. It sounds like a nice thing. I never saw though that it was in our circle. I never saw that people would like purposely try to get it for that reason. She's saying that in certain communities they do that.
What,
Yeah.
eat the fish?
Not eat. Well,
Also,
Right.
but no,
they
but
eat the fish on Rosh Hashana, but
Fish head, yeah.
no, we put fish to like
they
to
say
not
they
make
just put fish all around.
to like good
they
luck,
put,
like not have ayin hara.
Like fish jewelry or live
Or
fish?
jewelry,
Everything.
like in events, we can put fish, on table like an aquarium or something.
Oh, really? Oh, nice. Okay.
Yes, but in jewelry also, and when the baby is born, like we put fishes with hamsa and things.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so that goes through more or less the seder of tefillah. I think I went through everything. If I think of something else, I'll mention it. But now just do some other halachas, I guess, a little bit. So on the first night, we spoke about that's when we eat all the special simonim. After the first thing is we wash and we dip the challah in honey. There's different customs about dipping it in salt. In other words, some people dip it only in honey. Some people dip it in honey and in salt. Some people do the same piece of bread in honey and salt. Some people do the first piece of bread in honey and the second piece of bread in salt.
But
Right?
it's
There's
true
different
that we need to, like, for those who only dip in the honey, they need to put the salt only to see.
And some people keep the salt on the table, but they don't use it. In
It's all,
my
and all
house,
this is all, it's
they're all
only
different
Chabad.
minhagim.
Okay.
There's all different minhagim all throughout it. And I tried looking into if there's any official custom in Chabad. Apparently there doesn't seem to be any official custom in
You
Chabad.
don't know
In
what
my
the Rabbi
house,
did?
What did the Rabbi do?
I didn't think there was a clear. I didn't get. I mean, the people that I asked, I didn't get a clear. Thing. So, listen. In my house, growing up, there was no salt on the table until Hashana. Our custom is that when we dip the challah in the honey, it's not only on Rosh Hashana. Every
Until the-
Yom Tov meal, like in every Shabbos or Yom Tov meal, not during the weekday you don't have to, but let's say every time you're supposed to, like it's a mitzvah to have a suda, so the challah is dipped in honey. So that's Rosh Hashanah, Shabbos, Shuvah, Erev Yom Kippur. Anytime you're supposed to really, like it's a mitzvah to have the challah, it's a mitzvah, then it's dipped in honey, and then again Sukkot until Hashana Rabbah, when that's the completion of the judgment. Okay. And it's done, and I guess that's the way my father understood the way it's brought down in the menhagim, that even the salt wasn't on the table. So all the years we didn't have that because I think that the Rabbi said something like bring the salt afterwards, or something like that. I don't remember now exactly what it is. That was his understanding. That's the way we did it. I know that there's others that try to have at least the salt on the table, like you said, or some people even dip it into both. Okay. That they're all.
What if you want salt on your food?
Someone does like this, it's okay. Someone does like that, it's okay.
Okay.
Everyone's trying to. Now there's halachah. You have to have salt. The question is, how do you satisfy that? So some want to say, in other words, it's
The food,
halachah to
right?
have salt with the bread, specifically, particularly with the bread.
So the challah is good.
There's a salt to have on the table, so that's why some people at least try to have it on the table. Like the Mizbeach had salt on it, so. That's why we have salt on our table, because like in Mizbeach. So that's a real thing to have salt, and so one of the explanations that I read was that technically honey would work as well in terms of the halacha of having salt. It's just that honey is not allowed to go in the mizbeach. That's halacha, that honey is not allowed to go in the mizbeach. But it's not really a mizbeach, so therefore the honey could take the place of the salt. Was one of the explanations that I read to justify the custom of not having at all salt. Okay, so anyway, so everyone has its reasons and its justifications, and I did research, well, not this year, but in the past, and I didn't come up with a clear thing, and about just clearly done a certain way. There is an implication in the sichos and in the menhagim, the way it's presented is that the salt we didn't even have salt on the table. The salt was brought to the table on Hashana Rabbah, like the Frierdiker Rebbe asked. I think it's in a Sikha that's quoted in the Menhagim that on Hashana Rabbah, the Frierdiker Rebbe, Shmini Atzeres rather, which is the first Yom Tov meal after Hashana Rabbah, the Frierdiker Rebbe asked for the salt to be brought to the table, which implied that up until that point there wasn't even any salt on the table. And in terms of the people who remember exactly, by the time I tried to research, the memory was faded already at that point. And by the way, with these things, it's a very tricky thing for people to remember. The most important thing is the way the minhagim are presented, the recorded minhagim, because how one person remembers some years like this, some years like that, and then it should never. If there's a recorded minhag, that always takes precedence from like what people remember a little bit here and there. If there's no recorded minhag, you try to find out if there's a consensus is one thing, but memory. Not everybody could even remember these things. The only person who could even remember in edus, in testimony, so you can't always ask, if there was no reason why the person was supposed to concentrate about it, so they're going to ask you, what color socks was the guy wearing? Why in the world would I even look at the guy's socks? It doesn't mean I didn't see I didn't see the guy word or the other guy. I can't remember what color his socks were. I never concentrated on it, right? So if it's not something you have a reason why you would concentrate about it, then you can't remember properly. The assumption is that there's no way you could remember that properly. So only people that really understood halacha very, very well and knew that there's a reason to know about whatever the particular issue might be, that there's halachic background, halachic discussion, different customs, then they'll look to see how the Rebbe does everything. So we're talking about, to begin with, not a lot of people that even took notice of because they realize that there's an issue over here and we want to see how the Rebbe is doing it. And from those people, unless it was recorded right away, it's hard to remember. So
But if a person wants salt later in the meal,
yeah, you could have. We're talking about like
only for the bread.
But when you break the bread and when you have the challah, so it's a mitzvah all year round. There's an obligation to have salt, dip it into salt. On Rosh Hashana we do it in the honey. Our minhag is to do from Rosh Hashana till Hashana Rabbah, every Yom Tov and Shabbos meal. Okay. The question was about the salt. It wasn't a clear thing. Some people have the salt on the table, but they don't dip it in the salt. At least they have the salt on the table, because it says that the table is supposed to have salt as the mizbeach. Some people dip the bread into the salt also, both, and there's two varying customs with that. Some do the same piece 3 times in honey, 3 times in salt, and some people do one piece in honey first, and afterwards they have the second piece that they do in salt, and some people don't have salt altogether.
What's the Chabad custom?
So I said that it's not recorded officially that there's a Chabad custom that's recorded is to dip it into honey. Whether or not what we do with the salt is not recorded officially. I said that there's implication from certain sichos or whatever it is that there wasn't any salt on the table. That's how my father understood all along, and that's what we had in our house. In our house there is no salt. I believe that on some other houses there may be salt as well. Either way is acceptable. Either way has reasons and sources to back it up. So that's why.
Why do we dip 3 times?
In general.
In general.
Do a lot of things 3 times.
I
don't know if there's a specific reason in this case, a particular reason why to do it 3 times, or it's just similar to a lot of the things that are done 3 times. It's called the chazakanian, in other words, to make it strong, that it
And also, why we
I
need to
don't
do a first cut with the
That has a special reason. That's always not just Rosh Hashanah. That's a special
Yes.
reason because the there's on the one hand, you want to have the you want to begin always you're supposed to you're supposed to make the bracha as close as possible to when you are ready to do it, ready to eat it. They don't make the bracha. Let's say I want to eat an apple. I want to eat a peeled apple. You don't make the bracha, then peel the apple and eat it. You peel it, get it ready to eat. And then you'll make the bracha and eat it, right? But we try to do it as soon as you're ready. So it's better to kind of cut a piece for yourself, then make the bracha and eat it. Now, there's also a mitzvah that it's better to make a bracha on a whole loaf. So we don't want to cut the piece. And there's a reason to cut it, there's a reason not to cut it. This is even in the weekday.
Mm-hmm.
So the pshara was how do you say that? To satisfy kind of both. So you cut into it a little bit. So you start cutting it, then you make but it's still a whole piece, and you make the bracha, and then you finish cutting it. Okay, now on Shabbos, we don't want to cut it at all. Besides for the regular idea that it's a good thing to make a bracha on a whole loaf as opposed to a piece. There's also a mitzvah lechem mishnah that you have to have 2 loaves, and the lechem mishnah, the 2 loaves are supposed to be whole. So we don't even cut it a little bit. We just make a mark, but it's for the same reason that it should take faster. I'll tell you the reason what's way explained in Shulchan Aruch. There's a halacha where you're supposed to open the challah from.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, you ever knew that? It's it's interesting how halacha, there's every little. There's a famous story in the Gemara with Menashe, was one of the kings of. One of the kings of the Yidden who
Menashe, the one that
he
wasn't so
served the
righteous.
Zara, right? And the Yidden were sitting under his rulership. There was a lot of idol worship, led by him, of course. And what happened was they were once studying in the times of the Gemara, in the times of the Talmud. They were once discussing in the Beis Medrash, and somehow Menashe came up. I don't remember the context of the discussion, or if it's even mentioned in the Gemara. I don't recall right now at this moment. And I guess one of the sages at the time, I don't remember which one, I didn't look it up recently, the story. One of the sages said something about him in a negative light, because he, under his rulership there was a lot of idol worship. So came to him in a dream, I think, and he said to him that you don't understand the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah, because actually the sages davened that the Avodah Zarah, that the Yetzer, in other words, the urge, for idol worship, who really has can't control themselves. They really want to serve, go to India and I don't know what, and find, go from one type of Avodah Zarah to another, or whatever it is. It's not a very strong desire that's burning in us like a fire, like we have such a desire to do this Avera. In the olden days, there was such a thing. The Chazal davened that it should kind of be weakened. And this way we shouldn't be so susceptible to that. Okay? But that was before the sages davened to weaken it. And he says you can't imagine how strong the Yetzer Hara was for this. And he told them that if you would be in my generation, in my time, not only would you serve idols, but you would lift up your robe. They wore long robes. You lift up your robe, you should be able to run to the idol to serve it faster.
So how did
So you
anybody
shouldn't trip over your robe.
resist? Some did resist.
Okay, but he told them that he wouldn't have
He personally
that
wouldn't have had the strength.
this great sage wouldn't even be able to overcome that. And then he told them, he was trying to tell them how much Torah they knew in his time, how much Torah they learned. In other words, he's trying to say that the Torah learning that existed at that time was unprecedented. Even young little children knew the whole Seder of Taras, which was the most complex section, right, of Negoim and Olis, the most complicated parts of the Torah. I mean, young little school children, 8 or 9 years old, they were fluent in all of that. Okay, stuff that we don't even learn today practically. Only like, you know, we say it once, we know all the basics. You know, some people get to that. And we learn it a little bit because it's part of Torah, but it's not really learned properly because we just don't even get to it. And in those days, that even the young children, 8 or 9, they were fluent in it. And then he challenged him to a simple question. He said, "What's the part of the bread that you're supposed to open? Like when you cut the piece, what are you supposed to?" And he didn't know. And then they came to the Beis Medrash and they discussed it. And the halacha is from the part that it's baked well. Okay, so basically, what is it? It means that every time, in theory, every time I want to open a challah, so I can't just cut off a piece and eat it. There's halacha over here. I have to examine the challah. Usually the end. It's usually the edge of the challah, right? That's where it's baked better. I suppose if you really like the middle part, the softer part, you could eat from there also. But what this halacha says is the part that's baked better.
So it's not
more well
random.
done.
It's not random, like a random.
So it's not
cut.
random. That's the whole thing. How we came to this whole discussion. It's
Yeah.
not random. So technically, when you're sitting on the end and you're about to eat the challah, you have to start looking at it and think, so where am I going to cut it from? So what you do is, but if you already make the bracha, because it has to be whole, right, when you make the bracha. So you're going to make the bracha, then you're going to have to start examining it. Okay, where am I supposed to cut it from? That's going to be not so close to the bracha. So first examine it, decide where you're cutting it from. Decide where you're going to cut it from, and make a mark. You don't have to cut into it, just make a mark. Right? So now, after you make the bracha, it won't take you 5 minutes to figure out where you have to open it from. You'll be able to open it right away. Now, for that reason, it would appear that you're supposed to look for the mark that you made, because that's the whole point why you made the mark, is that you should know where you need to open it from. So it's explained in the further commentaries that no, you don't have to do it. The idea is that once you got the general area, it's not one little line in the challah that you have to cut. You have to look at the challah and see the best part of the challah that you're supposed to take your piece from first when you make the bracha. So you got the general area. So the assumption is that once you already looked at the challah and you determined the general area where it's baked best, and then you're gonna eat from it. So you're gonna find it quickly. So you don't have to look for that's even worse. You're gonna have to start looking for the mark that you made. You're also not gonna be fast. That's the whole point.
Well, there's also a thing about you cut off a little piece and throw it away because there's something about you'll lose your Torah learning if you don't.
In the end, there's no source for that, but it's a custom. So when it comes to these things, no one wants to take a risk. No one wants to forget their learning. The edge of the challah, the last little piece, which is, by the way, it would appear goes against this Gemara that we just said, which is Halachah. You're supposed to cut where it's baked best. Baked best means the end usually. That's where it's more well done. So how does that fit with what? So that what you're saying, it's not a contradiction because it doesn't say that anywhere. So it can't be a contradiction. Is it something we do? It's something we do. Something we practically do. Commonly, it's widely accepted. There are a lot of things that are mentioned in the Gemara about that you shouldn't do it because it causes you to forget your learning. And then there's other things that are mentioned not in the Gemara but in other sources, later sources, say for Hasidim, like in the Rishonim's time. Plenty of things that are mentioned. This is not really mentioned, I believe, in any of the original sources. But it's a common thing. What's a common thing? You have to be careful a little bit about it. Now, another important halacha. This is an actual halacha. Is any Yom Tif. You're not allowed to do from one day work from one day to the next. You're allowed to cook on Yom Tif for that day. You can't cook on Yom Tif for the following day. Okay? And therefore, what people don't always realize is that if I'm on the first day of Yom Tif, the night meal is the night meal of the second day. Right? Let's say Yom Tif this year is Sunday night, Monday night, and Tuesday.
So we cannot.
So on Monday afternoon, you can't start preparing for Monday night's meal.
So when we prepare to night,
After it gets dark.
okay.
Okay, after it gets dark, not only after Shkia, after it gets dark, after Hesek Hecham. Means like 25 minutes after Shkia.
Oh, so we don't have a lot of time.
You don't have a lot of time. So actually, traditionally, it's customary to
Prepare everything.
light, no, to daven in shul, the second night of Yom Tov. My father always talks about this, and tries to get them. They should have Rosh in shul because it was always customary the second night in shul to daven like late. The kratz around basically. Start a little late, go slow, sing a lot. The idea was you don't want to come home, kind of 15 minutes after nightfall, and then the table's not set, nothing's ready, and then at
Can
home there's
even
gonna
no
feel
set
pressure.
the table and anything.
Not right.
Any preparation.
And how goes like how can we cook for Yom Tov? Like okay, we have the candle, but now if I have a gas, how do we like how do we close the light? How do we like
Close it.
how do we do to in the gas? How do we cook on Yom Tov?
So on Yom Tov, you're first of all allowed to cook.
Yes,
You're
but
also
how?
allowed to make fire from one fire to
Yeah.
a different fire. You're not supposed to make new fire because that you could have done from before. Make the fire. So you're allowed to just add.
How do we
If
close?
you have it, so closed technically you're not supposed to.
So,
You have to leave it open.
Oh,
You have to try your best to like set the fires that it's like don't make it so big. Cook it fast, and then you're gonna have a huge flame open. You have to kind of
and then let it 2 days like this with the fire on the gas.
That's right.
yeah, that's what was always done. Try to leave the window open a little bit ventilated. If it ends up being a sakana, you can call a guy and ask him to turn off the fire. If it's a
Okay.
sakana, yeah. If it's a real sakana, you could.
No, for like I have small children, so like I don't want to let the fire like I don't know 2 days. But, go to sleep with the fire like this with the gas, and it's like. I heard that if we like, there is like a trick, like if we put boil, water with how do you say, seal, and then from himself he will like turn like how do you say, shut the fire. No, it's not allowed. We put egg on it. We put eggs to like boil the eggs, and then
Yeah.
with the water he will do it by himself.
Boils over, but it will.
Oh,
We are
but then
allowed
now the
to?
gas itself is still going. Even
Yeah.
though,
But the
once
gas we are allowed.
The gas you can turn off once the fire is off.
oh, so none of
Because
it's
we do
drowned.
it purpose to boil the egg, and then by himself with the water, he no.
It's an interesting idea. I suppose if there's a reason why it needs to be turned off, right? Like a good reason, like you think it's dangerous or whatever it is.
So
That would be a better way to do it than just to turn it off yourself. If it's dangerous, then you have to somehow get it turned off, either that way or ask a guy or whatever.
It's not so better to do everything before and that's it.
Well, how you're gonna keep? You're not gonna have anything warm.
No,
No,
we
no,
can,
you can
we
warm
We
it,
can
but
warm it.
Like on a
maybe
warming tray or something.
Yeah, put a platter like Shabbos. It's okay.
My Rebbitzin
So you
in
mean
Colorado.
keep the flame on low, and that's I think how most people do it. They don't always really cook like fully from scratch. They make most of the food before, and they kind of warm it up.
Okay.
And if it's at the end of the second day and they finish the dish that they were relying on, so they have to cook something new. So then they'll cook something extra. But at that point, it's only going to be on. It's not going to be on overnight anymore. In other words, it's not so bad if the fire has to be bigger. Bigger, you can make the fire bigger if it needs to be made bigger. Smaller, you're not supposed. Turning it off or making it smaller, you're not supposed to. The only time you're supposed to turn it, you can turn it lower, is if the food needs to cook on low.
Oh,
So therefore, so preferably you should open up a new fire that's low. But if that's not an option for whatever reason, so then you could lower the fire for this food. But yeah, what people really do is
It's
usually
difficult. All
the main
cooking.
the main cooking is done before. and then warming it up, or maybe cooking small little stuff that just that doesn't need very big flame. And they use either keep it fire covered with a black. You just have to make sure two things. Number one, yeah, the sheet of metal, whatever that you use like on Shabbos. The main thing, I suppose, is it's not so dangerous to keep the fire on. The main thing is you have to make sure that there's nothing nearby that can catch. God forbid, like there's no curtain or anything like that that's next to it. You have to be very careful, and you have to be very careful that there's also a little bit of ventilation in the room. It shouldn't be. Otherwise, maybe you all grew up like that.
But because in my house, when I open the gas, so first we start with the big fire and then we go to the small fire. So if I do like this, like we open, so the fire.
No, so open it
before.
Open it before. How does it open? It opens like with a igniter, or you have to.
Like no, you
Makes
press
a
the
noise?
button, makes the noise.
That's an electric light.
Yeah, so that's it.
I'm not. No, but so I
So-
cannot do.
So if you have the old, there's two kinds. One is there's
Make a noise.
it's a pilot light inside. There's a little fire burning the whole time. It doesn't make. Those are the ones that don't make a noise. If there's a fire burning the whole time.
In the oven?
No, on top,
Yeah.
you have a burner
in the
here and a
oven
burner
and-
here, and in between will be a teeny
If
flame.
you lift up.
And when you turn on this one, the fire comes to here. Because there's a little fire here.
No,
and you
it
open the
makes a
gas.
noise.
Yeah, that's the modern one, it's electric.
So I
No
cannot
pilot
do.
light.
I cannot do
Yeah,
anything.
you
with
turned
this?
on before. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, but if you just turn it, it's just gonna do gas, like if you not push it. So there's no sound, it just.
On
I
the old
need
one, the old kind or the new
I
kind?
do it before. I
Nearby.
think.
Yeah, I think you have to
So
push it
there's
in.
two kinds. One
Yeah.
kind has, if you lift up the range, you'll see in between the two burners, there's like a little pipe
Okay.
that has a little fire burning. It's called a pilot. So when you open the gas, it catches fire from here. It has to be something. The gas is not going to burn. You have to have fire to add it. So where does the fire come from? So some ovens have like this. This could be. You could turn it on Yom Tov because you're making a fire from a different fire. This fire, you're not creating fire.
Yeah,
You're
I
just
don't have
catching
this.
fire.
No, I don't.
If it clicks, so that means there's no fire. The clicking is the
Electric
like
igniter.
the match, basically. So you're not supposed to do
I
that.
need to do it before.
So you have to leave it on low. Let's say, to set it on low before, and if the lowest, let's say, if you need to make it a little higher, you can always make it
So
higher.
I can,
You could make it higher always.
but not low.
Lower you shouldn't unless it's the only way you need to cook. So for example, so let's say that the food needs a very low flame, otherwise it's going to burn or whatever it is. So then you could, and you only have a higher flame, then you could lower it. Okay. What you could do in those, you have to test it out. It could be that sometimes you could jump that quicker. If you push it, if you go past it, and then it's just going to be gas coming out, and then you can take a candle and light it
You can just
without
unplug it.
using that.
You'll unplug the stove. There's an electric plug into the wall. You can unplug it before you unplug
I'm
it.
not, yes, it's very.
Yeah, will it work then?
Right, because
Will it
then what
work?
you do, you have to then bring a flame from somewhere else.
If you
You
unplug
see,
it,
I did that because I don't want the non-Jew turning on the stove. I unplugged
you
it.
unplug it.
So now I use a sparker, every day I use a sparker, or you can use a match. You turn on the gas, you put the match, and
If
then
you unplug it, it's still going to work. Regular gas.
the gas will flow
Like
out,
holding-
but you have to
holding-
bring the fire to it.
Yeah, I get it.
So on Yom Tov, you could then take a candle from your, whatever, your flame over here, turn on the gas, put the flame here, and then it'll turn on.
No, that's good to know.
But you gotta unplug it from the wall,
Yeah, I get it.
the electric
It's a
thing.
little hard usually because it's hard
Well,
to
you have
pull
to
out the.
Depends on where it is. In this case, it was a
In
built-in,
between.
and there was a cupboard underneath, so I opened the cupboard doors, and back here I reached and unplugged.
Okay.
Okay.
So you're not supposed to prepare. So this applies not just for Hashana, always.
Okay. So you can blow the shofar.
Yeah.
C'est Shabbat, en vrai, il y a longtemps.
It's done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Boy, I'm sorry.
I don't know whose that is. It's not mine.
Oh.
It's like a notebook or something. Anybody?
Inside is the same name.
I didn't open it.
Okay.
Looks like a planner or something.
So one, we thought that maybe we can like put only the oven, and then we can, it's less dangerous,
Well,
the oven.
you know what people do? They don't leave it on for the oven. Again, it would only really work for warming.
No.
They don't leave their oven on.
Mm.
They take a bunch, they take a tray, put the tea lights, bunch of tea